evening, my fellow Rotarians and guests. On behalf of the President and the members of the Rotary Club of Subang, I would like to welcome all of you to the Spina Bifida Hydrocephalus Initiative, Why Dash Matters. I'm Rotarian Haslina, and it is my honor to be your virtual MC today. Now, before we start the meeting, I would like to read out the house rules for this meeting to ensure a smooth meeting flow. Number 1, have a name to your Zoom profile so we can address you. Number 2, turn on your video so we can see you. Number 3, all participants will be on mute. Number 4, use Zoom's chat function to participate and send your questions. Number 5, think about your action on camera. Number 6, if you connect to more than one device, make sure you mute all devices except one. Number 7, have fun with it. Then we would like to thank the support from the President and members of our meeting partner clubs today and would like to recognize them. And please wave your hand on the screen when I call upon your club name. Rotary Club of Lake Gardens, Rotary Club of Kampung Baru City Centre, Rotary Club of Kepong, Kuala Lumpur, Rotary Club of Bukit Jalil, Rotary Club of Utara, Subang, Jaya, and we have visiting Rotarians, District 3310 Rotary Foundation Chair, Dr. Shahul Hamid from Rotary Club of Singapore, and we have visiting guests from Lions Club of KL Central, President Tan Jia, First Vice President Ray Ko, and I hope I don't miss anyone. And last but not least, Rotary Club of Subang. Come on, wait.
MC, you missed our visiting Rotarian from RC Madras.
Oh, sorry about it. Okay, let me readdress. So sorry about it. Past President Guna Shekhar, Sadam Sivan from Rotary Club of Madras, District 3232 from India. Hi, welcome. And thank you very much, my fellow Rotarian. And now I invite the presidents to make their club announcement and updates. So starting with the host club, Rotary Club of Subang, President Dinesh, over to you.
Thank you, Rotarian Haslina. I once again, very good evening. And for my classmate residents and visiting Rotarians and guests, thank you for joining us this evening. Let me make my announcement really quick. For the club update on on 11 December. The ILTS goes first. All right, 12 December we have our ILTS, this is a second session where our district interact chair is going to talk about on a topic, know your interact and interact citation and milestone. Right, the first session was quite successful. We had nearly 170 participants on the first session. So hope to see more participants on the second session this coming Saturday, which is on 12th December. The next announcement is we have an fellowship. We're going to have a fellowship called Sparkle Simmer Shine at Shell's Resident. Okay, 11 December, 6 p.m. onwards. So Shelly personally sending this invites to all our club members and those who are here. Bring your kids along and let's put up a Christmas tree together as a Rotary family. So we're going to put up a tree, but the ornaments, it's going to be made of recycled items. So hopefully we have some recycle items. Maybe we need to collect some recycle items around the house before we do that.
Actually, I was supposed to put this as a very small font at some corner somewhere, but never mind, I'll just shout it out. Most of these coffee pots actually was courtesy of our guest speaker today, Dr. Kriban. So it's given me a whole bag full of this. So we can make as what you see the pictures that is shown on the EDM.
Okay.
So we have to thank Dr. Kriban for that.
All right.
He cleaned his house.
Let's move towards the next announcement. We're gonna have our AGM on 16 December. So please take note. Attendance is compulsory. And last but not least, we are going to have our Christmas potluck dinner at Dominic's place on 27 December. Right. So members, please take note. We haven't started the list yet, right, for the potluck. So we're gonna start the list for the potluck. So try to contribute and bring some delicious dish so we can have a celebration. Yeah, that's all from my side. Thank you. Moving back to Rotary Haslina.
All right, thank you very much, President Dinesh. And next, we move to Rotary Club of Lake Gardens. President Glory, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Haslina. Good evening, everyone, guests and Rotarians. I'm Glory from RC Lake Gardens. As for our club, we only have one announcement, which is on the 14th of December. Next Monday will be our AGM. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President. Okay, next we move to Rotary Club of Kampung Baru City Centre. President Suki, over to you. President Suki.
You are mute. President. President Suki, you are mute. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Haslina. Good evening to my fellow presidents and Rotarians. Only one announcement. This Sunday, we'll be meeting again for the urban farming project. We have just completed our composting, and last Sunday, it was a success, as we had also makan-makan. We harvested our green chilies. We've got, I think we harvested about 21 kilograms of green chilies and 7 kilograms of chili padi, and we managed to sell all of them. So we also had a gathering with the community of Kampung Baru. We even cooked at the place where we have our urban farming project. And to me, it was successful as we managed to engage with the community that we serve. And so this coming Sunday, we're going to meet again for rain harvesting and also a talk on aquaponics, because we are going to introduce aquaponics to our garden, to our laman. So if any of my club members free, please come for the gathering on Sunday, this Sunday. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, President Suki. Next, we have Rotary Club of Kepong, Kuala Lumpur. President Joanne, the floor is yours.
You can move to the next president, Asilina. Joanne is not here.
All right. Then we move to Rotary Club of Bukit Jalil. President Simon Nadaraja, over to you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Because my president today can't make it, today is our club meeting. I will be on behalf of president. My name is Angelina. Okay, we have two announcements. The first announcement, we are doing a charity project for cycle pedaling for suicide awareness. This will be on 19 December. That means from KL, Brickfield, we will be moving to Kajang, make a stop there from Kajang to Nilai, from Nilai to Negeri Sembilan. On the 20th, we will be arriving in PD, Port Dickson. And then on the 20th, that morning, same day, once the cycling people will be arriving, we'll be having a hiking with our Rotary family. We would like all the clubs to come and join together with us on that day, on the 19 and 20. We will post it more information into our Rotary Bukit Jalil page. The second announcement will be our AGM is dated on the 30th. Will be held in Selangor Club. That's all from me. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, PE Angelina. Next, we have Rotary Club of Utara Subang Jaya, President Valamarti. Over to you.
Hello, everyone. All right, thanks to RC Subang to allow us to join for this evening. And I only have one announcement, that is we will be having our AGM on 16th December. So that would be only for this month. So we have other plans for next year, actually. So due to CMC, we can't do much here. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much to all the presidents for your updates. And now, without further ado, I would like to invite President Glory once again from Rotary Club of Lake Gardens to introduce our beloved guest speaker today. President Glory, over to you.
Thank you, Haslina. Fellow Rotarians and friends, a very good evening again. Our guest speaker for today has been instrumental in engaging with the Spina Bifida Association of Malaysia and being intimately involved in transforming it into a vibrant NGO supporting the SB community. In 2019, he was instrumental in setting up the Rotary District Action Group on Spina Bifida and Hydrocephalus becoming chair. This was the first time in the district that an action group had grown out of grassroots actions at club level. Dr. Kribanandan Gurusamy Naidu is a civil structural engineer, is president of Rotary Club of Damansara and chairperson of DASH. He has been spearheading the linkages between RC Damansara and the Spina Bifida Association of Malaysia for over a decade. He is increasingly devoting his time to these endeavors. Before returning to Malaysia in 1993, he studied and worked in the UK for over a decade and then spent several years in Botswana in Southern Africa, where he was involved in sustainable design, delivering appropriate housing technologies and identifying water resources for rural and desert communities. He has always been passionate about the rights of disadvantaged communities and also keenly involved in sustainability and the efforts for the protection of the environment over 15 years. And in that time has made significant impacts on people's lives through his early involvement with the Angkor Association for the Disabled in Cambodia, uplifting the lives of landmine victims, setting up of the ELC Interact Club, which remains a vibrant entity today, engaging teenagers into service projects. He manages an engineering consultancy based in TTDI KL, providing specialist design and technology services to the construction sector. Dr. Kribanandan is married to Ms. Rekha, a British-trained dietitian, now retired, who was instrumental in setting up the dietetic profession in Malaysia in the 90s. Blessed with 3 sons, Jay Shan teaches business studies in London. Avinash runs his own IT solutions consultancy in Kuala Lumpur, and Kiran now embarking on a PhD with the Bristol University Scholarship. Please welcome Dr. Kribanandan.
Thank you very much. Dr.
Thank you so
Kriban.
much. Thank you so much, Rotarian Glory, for that kind of introduction. If I may, I will try and share my screen. Can you see it? Can you all see that? Yeah. Okay.
Yes, you can.
Thank you. Let me just start. I'm going to talk to you about the Spina Bifida and Hydrocephalus initiative and the question of why DASH matters. And I hope this becomes obvious as we go along. First, let me just start by introducing you to what the condition Spina Bifida is. It's actually a Latin word which means split or open spine. As you can see from the pictures on the right there, basically what happens in an SB patient or SB person is that the spinal cord does not close up as we'd expect with the spinal cord. There is an opening in the spinal cord which happens within the first month. And so this is basically a neural tube defect. So the neural tube does not form properly, and there is actually a gap, as you can see in the images in the slides here. So depending on how big that opening is, and also how severe the distending of the spinal cord is, you have different levels of spina bifida. So the first one you can see there is called the spina bifida occulta, where the opening is very small and the spinal cord remains within the neural tube. And in that case, the kids, whoever have this, can actually function quite normally, but normally would have bladder and bowel control problems. That's always a given in most SB patients. The second type of spina bifida is basically SB meningocoeli. Here, the opening is much wider, but still the spinal cord is within the main neural tube, and therefore the kind of impacts this has is basically basically affecting mobility to a large extent, and the kids might need some kind of physical aid to move around. The most serious form of SB is the myelomeningocoeli, as it's called, and here, as you can see in the diagram, very much extension of the spinal cord into that gap. And once that happens, you have many issues associated with mobility, with bladder control, and other impacts in terms of the condition. So let me just go on. This gives you a bit of a background. So what are the consequences of this? As I already mentioned, there could be paraplegia, weakness of the legs. There's always a loss of control over the bowel and bladder, which of course is very serious in terms of living a normal life. Then there is things like skin insensitivity, which leads to ulcers, foot and limb deformities. And often the SB condition is connected with hydrocephalus, which is basically fluid in the brain. And if this is not treated early, of course, it becomes quite serious. So as you can imagine, when a child is born, this is a condition which just happens during pregnancy. So when the child is born, within the first few days, you really need to operate to close that gap in the spine. But of course, and if you don't do it, the damage gets much worse, much more quickly. So the kids who have SB start to get operated on very early in their lives. And I know of SB in our SB community here in Malaysia. Some people have had 20 to 30 operations within a span of about 10, 15 years. So it's a serious condition, and we'll examine this a bit more as we go along. Often people ask me about what is the incidence and prevalence of SB in the country. Unfortunately, we don't have a national registry in Malaysia, and so we have to base this on basically research and some information which is available to make some estimates. If you look in that yellow box there, you can see that the condition is much more common in males. There's a high prevalence of SB in the Malays, in the Malay population, also in the indigenous Sarawakian and Sahaban population, much smaller in the Chinese population. There is, of course, as I said, always associated with this mobility and bowel bladder issue, which of course affects quality of life, and this needs to be managed. So if you take all those available statistics, which are available locally and internationally and so on, and based on the fact that we have something like 500,000 live births in the country, we are looking at about 4,500, up to about 4,500 SB cases Malaysia per year. So that's quite significant. And of course, over the years, we have quite a large SB community in the country having some of these issues. This is just another set of images. This is actually just from one small research which was done in 2017 at UM. Again, just to give you a flavor of that, you can see the mix between females and males, for example, ethnicity, and so on and so forth. But again, this is a small subset, so we have to rely more on the average figures which we have from other sources. So to deal with this, in 2006, in fact, the lady who is in blue there, in the front there, her name is, she's Professor Dr. Amara Naikar. She is a rehab physician. She called for a meeting or a conference, to basically discuss spina bifida. And then, based on that conference and the fact that she had quite an amazing turnout, decided to set up with the lady on the right there, Dr. Young, who was in fact the first president. So SBM was then set up formally in 2007. So SBM stands for the Spina Bifida Association of Malaysia. So today that's the organization which is basically central to raising awareness of SB&H in Malaysia. Just like, we have other organizations doing other things with autism and so on. So this is an organization specifically for spina bifida. Of course, the focus has been to protect the human rights of SB&H community nationwide, including providing tangible assistance, both advisory and physical. And you will see some of these examples as I go along with my slides. We were introduced to SBM actually at one of our regular meetings, just like this one you're having today. And we meet on Thursdays, Rotary Club of Damansara. In 2010, both Dr. Amara and Young came to give us a short presentation about SB. And some of us in RCD who were at the meeting were quite moved by this because I for one had not heard of this condition. And I was just amazed that there were so many impacts on people's lives and we knew nothing about it. So that started the journey for us. We got involved, and of course, as the saying goes, once you volunteer, it's very difficult to get out of it. So that's what happened. So the last decade or so, we have been involved with this issue as a club. Just to give you a very quick flavor of some of the things which have happened in the last 2 years, and this is quite relevant to the formation of -2. We started actually in 2018 quite actively promoting awareness around the country. We started with the East Coast. Most of the work before that was basically in the Klang Valley and Kuala Lumpur and Selangor. And we had this first conference in the East Coast, and we were amazed at the turnout. And we were also able to connect with something like 30 new families who had SB children. And it just gave us a flavor of the fact that there's so little being done around the country. And so this was part of the reason for setting up the DASH partnership, or the District Action Group on Spina Bifida Hydrocephalus. Also in 2018, we were quite fortunate to be invited to the International Federation of Spina Bifida and Hydrocephalus, which is based in the Netherlands, based in Belgium. And they had their 28th international meeting, as it turned out, in New Delhi. We were invited, and it was quite impactful. We met a lot of people from around the world with this condition, and shared many of the same issues. And so it was a very powerful meeting and a powerful way of moving forward. Arising from these two things in 2018, we decided sometime in that year, I think it was May, that we would try and set up this district action group. I mean, frankly, RCD and some of us in Rotary Club of Damansara had very little knowledge about how the district action groups were organized. So we just set it up as a partnership with a few clubs, not really informing the district at that time. And then we embarked, in 2019 on further awareness campaigns in Sungai Petani, Johor Bahru. In the last year or so, we've been quite involved. We started to do this music class for our SB children, which was very well received. But of course, we weren't able to continue it because of the pandemic. But we hope to revive that. And more recently, I was involved in a seminar or webinar rather, which was hosted by the International Federation, where we spoke about our journey here in Malaysia on the SBK. And every year in 25th of October, there is the World Spina Bifida Day. And so this is when we actually spoke. So let me just go on to give you a bit more of the information. CBM itself, as I say, is the president is Professor Dr. Amara. As you can see, there's a very close connection. Some of us from RCD have been involved with the organization, and I'm currently the vice president. Francis, some of you must know, is also an RCD member, been treasurer. And Nazri has been a long time member. He's got a child who is SB, and very committed to the organization. So let me just go into what it means to have spina bifida, because I think some of these images will give you a flavor of the issues. So I said a lot of the kids have mobility issues. In fact, all of them have different levels of mobility issues. So you can see some of the images giving you some of those different conditions. And of course, if you have a mobility problem, you need to have physical aids to be able to move. And so this becomes something which, if you're a B40 family in Malaysia, it's going to be a very expensive thing to be able to provide for your child. And that's where, again, where we come in terms of the support which is required. So as you go to more serious conditions, then wheelchair is required. But we must understand that because there is a spinal problem, we cannot give SB children normal wheelchairs. It has to be specially designed with backrest and various other things. So because of that, the wheelchairs become specialized and much more expensive. It can be as much as 5,000 ringgit per time to get something which fits the requirements of an SB patient, depending on the severity of the problem. The image here is one of our SB family, I call it Avina, who's obviously fully in a wheelchair, very serious condition with SB, but has made a life for herself. She's a writer, she's a cook, she designs, and it's been quite amazing. She's made quite a career for herself, despite her mobility issues and so on. As I say, mobility is a big problem, varying degrees of severity. Almost all of it involves some kind of lower limb issue. And because of that, there's a wide range of requirements for aid in terms of calipers, wheelchairs, braces, and so on. So of the SB families we know of, and some of the research findings and so on, something like only about 33 of the 33, or less than 33% of those who are affected, don't have a sort of a serious mobility issue. So it's quite a major problem which needs to be addressed. We are often asked about the condition. Basically, is it preventable? Yes, it is to some extent. And a lot of research has shown over the years that that folic acid is a very important component during a woman's pregnancy to be able to reduce the incidence of spina bifida. As you can see, if you have the right intake of folic acid, and if you have it at the right time, you can reduce the incidence by 75%. And this has been achieved in many countries, for example, in Europe, in Sweden, and so on, Scandinavian countries, where they have actually fortified their foods. So the reason for that is that you have to take folic acid well before pregnancy, at least 6 months, a year before. And so, and that's quite a tall order to try and, get young women to take this, because of course, you don't know when you're going to become pregnant. It's not always planned. And so fortification of foods becomes a very important part of this. So, if we can, as a nation, fortify our food, we can then start to bring down the incidence of SB quite rapidly. But there's always a 25% chance that this will happen even with the right folic acid intake, because some women just don't absorb folic acid as easily as others. And so this is something which we have to live with. But of course, if we can reduce that incident, this is something which we should deal with. And this is something which we as Rotary members can quite easily help with in terms of raising the national awareness and engaging with the right authorities to make sure that this happens. And this is something we can discuss maybe at the discussion. The other question we often get asked is this curable? No, it's not curable, but it's manageable. And this is where I think, we need to be able to intervene where it's required to reduce complications in later life. Can people lead normal lives? Yes, indeed. And we have many examples of our SB community here who have done very well in their professional lives, have lived normal lives. Some of them are married. And so, there's all of that. But of course, for that to happen, there has to be adequate healthcare, rehab interventions, finances, of course, and accessibility to care. And this is where I think, this all comes up. About 2 years ago, because everybody was asking us, what does it really cost a family to live if they are, diagnosed with this issue? So we did a whole range of costs from, what was a minimum cost, what was the maximum cost. And you can see that first category is the catheters, the diapers, the medications and so on. That can cost anything between 400 to 1,000 a month to any particular family. And you go to the next thing, the orthosis, all the walking frames and so on. And these can vary from 200 to about 5,000. So if you put all of that together, what we found was that, we would have a prorated cost of about between 500 ringgits to about 1,500 per family. So you can see these are huge costs, and we may not be able to. Most families may not be able to meet this. In fact, based on our recent community assessment, which we did, it's confirmed that the majority of our families are either B40 or M40, which means that they certainly cannot afford this kind of level of income and this kind of level of expense on a day-to-day basis. And remember, this does not include things like school, education, daily living expenses, and so on. So, it's a huge cost. And there again, is where we come in. And this is why we felt very much that something like an organization called, in the district like DASH, really starts to matter. So the biggest challenge which the organization faced, CBM, and we started to get involved with this, was of course the long-term sustainable funding to carry out the activities. This is something which we felt one of the solutions would be to develop partnerships, networking with other organizations, and this is where we in RCD stepped up, and we hope now that we can step up even further with the district action group on Spina Bifida and Hydrocephalus. So let me start telling you a little bit about the journey and how this organization got set up. In fact, we started early in around about 2018. We attended the first district meeting, which at in SP, which was quite good. We found there was a lot of interest among the Rotary members, and arising from that, we decided then to formalize the formation of DASH in 2018. Again, without any consultation at district level, because frankly at the time we really didn't know the process, so we did that. And then we had a very fortuitous meeting in Lumut, again in June 2018, when DGE at the time, Bhaskaran, was a guest of honor. This was a intercity meeting where something like, I think 13 clubs or 14 clubs were involved, held in Lumut. And it so happened that I was invited to speak about SB at that meeting. So we went up, in fact, quite a few of us from RCD went up, and I spoke. And based on that meeting and the fact that DGE was there, he spoke to me afterwards and said, hey, he really did not know much about this, but liked what I was saying. I would like to do something, but his whole year had already been organized. He didn't know how to fit this in, but please send me the information anyway. So that's what I did. I sent him all the information about SB and so on and so forth, and I didn't hear at all from him for almost about 8 months. Then sometime later in that year, I got invited to come and speak at the Rotary District Conference held in Penang in May 2019. And so that's when I suddenly realized that DG Bhaskaran had in fact done his homework and had decided that this was important enough to support as a district action group. There was no formal invitation otherwise. In fact, suddenly I was put on stage, I spoke, and that really started our journey, because everybody came up to us afterwards and said how they thought how important this was, and so then the rest of it is really history in the sense that DASH became formalized and we set it up, and we now have a thriving committee, which I will share with you in a few minutes. So this was that meeting. Interestingly enough, because there were I think about 6 or 7 organizations or district action groups which were invited, we were all given 5 minutes, and I took my slot very seriously. I prepared a very concise presentation for 5 minutes. And of course, everybody else took a lot longer, but since I was new, I didn't complain on it. But anyway, I think it made the impact, and we were quite well received. And as I say, we went on from that. So our forward plans were quite clear. The idea was to use CBM's excellent network of doctors and practitioners we had already developed over the decade before, who were committed to raising the NTD issues and its management, linking that up with a very strong structure of clubs which we have in the Rotary movement. And so that was a very simple idea, and I think that's starting to bear fruit now, and hopefully we can then move forward with these linkages to take the message across. This is the current committee. In fact, there's two other doctors who have been added, and I'll just say their names in a short while. But as you can see, right earlier on, I approached PDG Leslie Salahuddin, and he was he didn't know much about the issue, and went away at the meeting saying to give him a bit of time. But again, after he did his reading and his research, he came back and said, yes, he would support this. And he's been very instrumental in pushing forward the agenda, and I'm very grateful, and I'd like to thank him for all his efforts. And of course, you can see there are some very familiar names there. Dr. Silva, who is a nephrologist and very much involved with SB Care. And in fact, when we did the first conference in Kuala, he was the only nephrologist in the whole of the East Coast. And when he met me the first time, he was almost in tears. He said, "Look, I've been looking for support for the last 8 years while I was here in the East Coast, and we couldn't get it. And now there you are, just as I was." In fact, he left Kuala a year after that, but we did make some amazing inroads thanks to him, some of the efforts. And again, you can see some of the other names. Quite a few of our RCD members are still involved, but we have now expanded the committee to others. What we have also done, and then again, this has been a first for a district action group. We had a meeting with all the action groups some time ago. In fact, Shirley was quite involved with this meeting, and we decided at that time that maybe it was about time that also non-Rotarians would be involved or invited to become part of the DASH group. And so we've taken this forward. I think the first district action group to do that. So we've invited Professor Amara to become a member, and also two other doctors, Dr. Pungori, who is in Klang Valley, and Dr. Yusma, who was very instrumental in our Kuantan initiative, to come on board. So we have three non-Rotarians who are in the DASH committee at this point in time. And I think that brings quite a lot of richness to the organization, in the sense that it links up our message and our drive to raise awareness with, for example, CBM, which is the primary proponent of this condition. We cannot work independently and separately from the organizations on the ground. And this will become even more obvious when I talk to you about the global grant, which we are embarking on shortly. So at the moment, this is the leadership team in DASH, myself as chair, PAG, so Dr. Silva as co-chair, Dr. Narayan, Chan Narayan as secretary, and of course, PDG Leslie as our advisor. And of course, we have a very strong team of doctors as well as non-doctors who are very passionate about moving the agenda forward. So what are the activities we are planning? Of course, awareness and education is very important, and I'll come back to that as part of the global grant. Assisting with the needy families. We have a lot of financial assistance requirements. You can see some of those on the right there under CBM financial assistance. We've been providing this on a continuous basis for the last 5 to 6 years. As I already mentioned, these costs can vary from 500 to about 1,500 per family. But when you talk about particular equipment and so on, it can be even up to about 5,000. So we try and find this money. And again, the Rotary network becomes very important. We can identify the need. We can post it to our Rotary friends with DASH, and then maybe raise funds as required as we go along for particular families. We have already developed a system of needs assessment and so on, and we have that quite well organized at this point in time. So the idea then also is to connect with members, or connect our members to the nearest healthcare professionals. And in this slide, we have a list of professionals who are on the CBM website, who people can connect with. and then networking to bring the wider perspective of SB care to not only to the wider public, but also to the families, because there are many things you take for granted, but people don't know they need to do with their children, and we can discuss that again. Finally, of course, the fundraising, which is, of course, the lifeline of any organization, and more so for SB because of the huge costs involved in the care. In terms of a district action group, just to share with you, the operational approach of all the district action groups is really, we are not independent societies. We act as a host organization. So that means we have to be linked up with the Rotary clubs. We have to be linked up with the national organizations, and that's how we progress awareness, education, and engagement. And this is exactly what we have done. RCD started this process with CBM, and now we are basically trying to bring a wider reach so that other clubs can be involved. But whatever the case, DASH as an organization does not have its own account, does not have funds by itself, but it will stimulate and raise funds and maybe send it to RCD or directly to CBM to be able to execute the project. Just to give you an example, in 2019 itself, we had all of these different expenses with home visits, with the Educate to Elevate conference in Johor and the northern sector and so on. As you can see, lots of money involved, but at each of those stages, we were able to get donations and so on to be able to alleviate some of that problem. But of course, we still need to have a certain amount of cash in the account to be able to carry on some of these activities. So you can see, these things have to happen on a continuous basis to be able to carry on with these requirements. Let me finish off with a few slides on the global grants. As some of you must know that in the last 2 months or so, I have been quite instrumental with RCD to apply for a global grant on this SB care. And basically, this is in the area of fighting disease. And so we have basically, provided an application through this avenue. There are 6 areas of service, of course, for Rotary, and the 7th one, which is being added on, the supporting the environment, which I hope we can all get involved with next year in terms of the global grant. But for the time being, in terms of the application we have just put in, is basically to do with training of healthcare professionals and special needs teachers on the management of spina bifida. Actually, also in this context with the carers as well, as you will see later on. So the objectives of that grant application is basically broadly to raise awareness and empower our members as well as our health professionals to enhance knowledge and provide training, to raise awareness, and particularly in terms of the need for combined multidisciplinary care. And this is quite important because, when you get an SB child, of course, the first issue is the spine and doing an operation and closing that spine. But then straight away, you're dealing with bladder problems, you're dealing with growth issues, you're dealing with issues to do with deformities as the child grows. Now, for example, just take the bladder issue alone. If you don't show and deal with this with the child at an early stage, they're going to have renal failure within the next 10 years because they can't go to the loo as we all can do ordinarily. They have to be taught, they have to be shown how to do this. And then when the child is growing up, they have all of these other issues to do with. So it's a multidisciplinary approach which is required for any child with SB. And so for a family to go to the hospital and go one day to see the nephrologist, another day to see the neurologist, and another day to see the bone specialist or whatever, becomes very taxing. And this is where the requirements for multidisciplinary clinics comes in. And there are not very many in the country. We have one in the Klang Valley. We have a couple around the country. But again, as you go to the rural areas, this becomes totally non-existent. So you can see the education and the requirements for this becomes very important. The other objectives is to encourage networking and linkages between families and the healthcare professionals. What we found early on in our involvement with RCD, just linking the families alone was so important because people can share experiences and they're talking to each other, they're meeting and so on and so forth. And that alone made such a huge difference to the families which we were involved with. And finally, to develop service centers as focal points. This is where Rotary clubs can come in. So if you can imagine, so if you go to SP and there are a group of Rotarians who are passionately involved with this, straight away you can set up a service center there with the SB families. So, again, just as we have done here in the Klang Valley, we need to emulate this everywhere else in the country, because we can't support families up north, for example, as readily as we can, for example, some of people living in Selangor and Kuala. So this is where the objectives are quite clear. The goals, of course, to improve knowledge and capacity of the local health professionals, and then, of course, the carers themselves, and then basically enhancing the health infrastructure with local communities. So all of this are objectives of the global grant, and we hope we can execute this. One of the first things which we had to do before we even sent in our application, and this I have to thank Dr. Sahul, who is in the audience today, for identifying this very early when I sent him the global grant, just before we started to look at this very seriously. He said to me, "Fantastic project, but please focus on your community assessment and survey, because if you don't, it's going to be quite difficult to get this through." And so we did an online survey among the SB community through our doctors, through the families we knew, and so on and so forth. And that was very, very instructive for us, and also gave us, the impetus to really beef up the application. And again, as I said, I really have to thank Dr. Shahu for identifying this at a very early stage. I won't go into this too much, but there were many things which we used in terms of method assessment and participant assessment and so on. And this, again, we can share with anybody else who wants to do this as part of their global grant application. What is very instructive for us, and very quickly, was what we found. Basically, again, it was very clear that there was primarily the B40 families we were dealing with, and also the M40 families we were dealing with. The majority of people who needed the kind of support. The feedback we got was a lot of the families, because once they had an SB child, meant that they just couldn't deal with the expenses. It became almost impossible. And then often mothers or one of the parents had to stop working to take care of the child, because you could not send your child to a childcare facility. Nobody wanted to take the responsibility. So again, straight away, the challenges became very obvious. You need care centers, for example, for families with needs. You need parents who understood those medical conditions, because they were not really aware. And the role of government and the services were not very well, researched, and people didn't know that they could go for support with the welfare department and so on. And then, of course, that interaction with the healthcare professionals was not really there. It was not comprehensive. It was not multidisciplinary. So all of this became very obvious, and so it strengthened our application. And so this is how we basically phased our application into 3 phases. The first phase was basically to develop the training materials. And I won't go into this in too much detail, but we already have a network of doctors and friends of SB and so on. We'll bring all of these people together and come up with professional teaching aids, so that, and videos and so on. And then we'll use this material to train the trainers in phase 2. And then once we have this trainers trained, we're hoping to have about 25 of these people trained and committed. And then we will send out batches of these trainers to the different areas. We have identified 7 locations where we will run workshops, which will involve not only the healthcare professionals, but also the special needs teachers, the public, as well as the caregivers. And then, we will run these workshops and then start to spread the awareness. And here, workshops at the moment, we have got Sabah, Sarawak, Negeri Sembilan, we have some in the north and so on and so forth. So we have 7 locations identified. And if in this journey, in the next 2 years, we can raise more funds, then we will expand this awareness campaign and program. And the idea here is to engage in the process with the healthcare professionals, of course. As you can see, these are some of the aims. Of course, at the very broad level, to enhance the relationships with the Ministry of Health and all that. And then the trainers to become resource persons with CVM, and then the parents and caregivers to form the support groups, and then the medical personnel to become our healthcare professionals, to become the links to our secondary and tertiary care hospitals. And then, of course, we are going to look at the various locations I've already mentioned, engage with the Rotary clubs nationwide so that they can become focal points. And then, of course, look at all the key focus areas, which I've already mentioned in my talk earlier. Then we will work with all of these to become the primary conditions. So these are the kind of things we have done already. These are some of the Elevate to, what we call educate conferences we've held. This one, the recent ones in Johor, as well as in SP. All very successfully done and very engaging. With this kind of approach, we hope to raise the awareness and, of course, engage with the clubs, and get this a nationwide movement rather than one which is just centered in the Klang Valley. So I hope I've given you some pointers. We started with a retort about why DASH matters, and I hope you can see why it does, and why we need to strengthen this organization and get more clubs involved. Of course, you can help by setting up SB&H focal point in your club, and we can provide the resources and the help and so on to get this organized. And be involved in these conferences and seminars we're going to organize as we go along. And then, of course, participate in the Global Grant project as partner clubs. Of course, we have closed the initial offering in terms of donations to the Global Grants, but there are going to be many other ways you can participate as we go along, and we hope to be able to engage with you in that regard. So with that, I will thank you, and I'll be very happy to take questions and maybe have a dialogue in the next few minutes. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Kriban. Now I would like to invite Rotarian Dina Ahmed to moderate the Q&A session. Rotarian Dina, over to you.
Yes, hi, good evening, Dr. Kriban. That was a very nice and informative talk. We do have a couple of questions here, but before we start with the questions, I just want to ask, are there any other types? How many types are there, sorry, for the spina bifida? Are there types, or are there just one, or how does it go?
Well, as I was saying, it's a very loose definition. If you look at it, three different types of spina bifida have been sort of identified. But there isn't a sort of a cutoff point from one to the other. It's a bit of a continuum. From our experience, the first kind, the kind which is called occulta, where the condition is quite mild, a lot of the SB families can live fairly, ordinary lives. They have one or two issues. Then you go to the myelogacally, where you have conditions which lead to mobility problems. And then finally, the most serious issues where you are confined to a wheelchair. So it's basically, I suppose, if anything, it's defined by mobility. So there are a significant number of people who don't have mobility issues, so they could be leading quite normal lives. And there's another set of very significant number of SB families whose children are totally on wheelchairs, which means they have a whole series of other issues to do with disability and so on. But there's a whole continuum in between, of course, depending on the seriousness, how early the intervention is. For example, I know when speaking to Dr. Silva, he was telling me about a child he had seen literally at birth after the operation. Other family had come to see him and given them family advice about the issues of bladder control and what they needed to do and so on. The child was only about 6 months. And then the family never came back because they were in Terengganu, and he has one clinic or two clinics here and there. He never saw them, and he saw the family again maybe when the child was 10 years old or 11 years old. And by that time, the girl had renal failure because the family had not taken into consideration, the kind of interventions required during the life of that child. And yet, if there had been continuous intervention, she could have lived a fairly normal life without that renal failure. Can you imagine living with renal failure at such a young age of your life? So so that continuum is there. And of course, if you don't intervene, even if you have a mild case of SB, it can become very serious, in your lifetime if you don't have the right interventions, operations, so on and so forth. And this is where we find that the incidence is very high in the East Coast. We don't know the statistics in Sabah and Sarawak, but we have been told by our healthcare professionals that it's unusually also high in those communities. So this is why we need to do the outreach also to these regions.
Okay, so we're taking questions from the floor. We do have one from Guna. So does SB lead to club foot disease? Is there any early intervention for CFD?
Yes, it can lead to that. There are operations which can be done, but again from my personal experience, of course I'm not a medical doctor, and this is probably best answered by our medical professionals. But just by my personal experience, I know some of the kids who've had operations. It's not a permanent solution. It starts to develop again because it's all connected with your nerve endings and so on and so forth. So it can be a problem which keeps recurring through your as you grow over your life. So, but yes, there is definite issues to do with deformity in the feet, which can cause serious issues to do with mobility.
Right. So our next question comes from Haslina. She's asking if this is passed down genetically.
Yes, there is some evidence that if you have one SB child, the incidence for a second child to have SB is very high, 70 to 80%. So this is something, of course, which needs to be very seriously taken into consideration. Then again, the early intervention in terms of folic acid, taking folic acid well before pregnancy and all that needs to be obviously taken very, very seriously. But yes, there is genetic association.
Cool. Okay, another question from our PE, Vinathan. He's asking, how do we know if the baby has SB?
Okay, there are actually tests which can be done very early in pregnancy to be able to pick this up. I don't recall the name of the test, but yeah, these can be done, as I said, quite early in the life of, or early in the pregnancy to be able to identify the child. But of course, in Malaysia, there is no way abortion at that sort of stage is allowed. But in some countries, this is in fact the practice. So, the incidence of SB also is maybe reduced because of that in some countries. So yes, identification can be done quite early in during pregnancy.
Our secretary, Hasina, is on the roll. Her questions are never ending here. So she's asking, are people with SB more vulnerable to COVID-19 given their underlying conditions?
Good question. I really don't know the answer to that. I suppose in the sense that, a lot of our SB families, because of the disability with one child, are facing huge issues with just normal living conditions. So, I know for a fact that we've had a lot of requests for support during this period. And of course, it's impossible to be able to provide support to all the families. So I suppose in the sense that, you are afflicted by those sorts of economic circumstances, presumably, you are certainly more vulnerable in that sense. But I don't know whether medically that's the case. That will require some other inputs. I think I'm not sure really.
Okay, our next question comes from Pipi Shirley. She's asking, how can the Rotary Club play an active and inclusive role in DASH activities? Could you share some project ideas for consideration?
Yeah, actually there's quite a few things which we have talked about and we require champions. Okay, of course the awareness campaign is the basic one. And so as we start to develop the global grants, I think we will need a lot of support from the clubs, not only here, but elsewhere. And we'll be calling upon the clubs to be able to support this. In that case, it not only is it by support through identifying SB families who can be targeted, as identifying healthcare professionals who you might know who are passionate or who might become passionate about this area, because we need to create that pool of resources. and also being involved, with the workshops and conferences. So that's one aspect, the awareness, but that can be a continuous thing. The other aspects are actually broadly very important also. For example, we need to engage at a very high level with the ministries and so on and so forth about fortification of food, and we need some champions for this. So for example, just to give you one example, we are basically a rice-eating nation, and we can fortify rice. The technology is already available. It's being done in India, for example, so we need to see whether we can get the country to adopt this fortification process for, say, our staples, rice, maybe some flour, salt, for example, and so on and so forth. All of this can be very easily done, but we need a national strategy. So if any of you have connections at ministry, have connections with different Ministry of Health and different organizations, like for example the rice, the Bernas and so on and so forth. These connections can be brought to us, and we can see how we can formulate to take this to the next stage. So that's another area of work which is very important. Then the final one, I wouldn't say the final one, but the next one which comes to mind immediately is that we are continuously having requests from families for help. Whether it's to buy catheters or whether it's to buy, to help with from walking aids or wheelchairs or medication or whatever it is, or in sometimes, interventions, medical interventions which are not available in the government hospitals. What we are doing with CBM and DASH is that we are going to start to document these requirements, and we will start to post this. And so maybe this is something which all the clubs can help with. If we say we have a particular need, we don't really have the funds to assist this family, this is the background, will you be able to take this up, as a club? And as I say, this can range from, interventions of a few $100s to up to 5,000 to 7,000 ringgit, depending on what is required. So these are, very tangible projects which can be done. Again, hopefully all of you will be involved. Finally, maybe, we need to set up the interest groups within the club. So if you have that interest and maybe one or two of your members are keen to get involved, volunteer them to DASH. We have a lot to do and not very much resources. So I think we're very welcome that kind of input. So again, a lot which can be done, and I hope that just gives some ideas to all of you. Shirley, I hope that answers your question.
Very long answers.
Okay, another question from PP Shirley, and she's asking what could be the possible reason behind the low numbers of SB among the Chinese?
Think properly before you answer. I'm half Chinese.
Well, I really don't know, Shirley. I think probably would require a whole research by itself in the country. Maybe we can finance one to see why that's the case. But I don't know. I couldn't even begin to provide any answers. But I will raise this with Professor Dr. Amara maybe and Dr. Silva. Maybe they might have some insights. Nobody has ever asked me that question, so it's a good one. Thanks.
All right. Okay, another question for President Dinesh. He's asking how much effort being put in educating the community about the relation between SB and forfeited food, particularly.
Sorry, education in the community between? Say that again.
The SB and the fortified food.
Yeah, actually, if you go, I'm sure all of you who have had pregnancies, the ladies in the audience, I'm sure if you go to when you're pregnant, you almost automatically get folic acid supplementation. It's part of the medical advice. And of course, this is very readily available in the urban clinics, in the urban centers, and so on, the urban government hospitals, and presumably also in our rural clinics and so on. But as I said to you earlier, the problem, of course, is that you really need to be taking this supplementation much before pregnancy starts. Of course, it's very important during pregnancy too, but for its full effect, it needs to be 6 to 12 months before pregnancy. So that is not something which is easy, but of course, we are raising this all the time, and of course, this is a general advice which needs to be, conveyed to all women who potentially who can become pregnant. So that it's taken. But of course, the only way you can surely do this is, again, going back to the idea of fortification of food, because it's almost impossible to be able to convince everybody to pop a pill, every day of the month, or every day of the year for this, unless you are planning on pregnancy. And how many of us, how many families actually plan that? It's not that common. So fortification is the key thing. But yes, we do raise the awareness every time. Certainly, on my personal capacity, when I know of anybody in the family, ladies and so on, I always raise this as an issue, and we can all raise it, with our friends and so on. So it can spread in terms of the information.
Right. We have another question from our PAG Raj. He's asking, is there a reason why there is no support and intervention from the Health Ministry?
Well, as I said to you, there is no independent statistics on SB. That means there's no independent record for SB as a condition in the country. So that's the first problem. So if you don't have records, that means this condition is being basically put together with all different disabilities. So for example, if you see an SB patient and they come in ambulating, having a problem with mobility, you might mistake them for having polio, for example. Because that is not recorded. So that's the first problem. So if you don't have the records, how do you have any special intervention? So this is the other, to Shirley's earlier question, the other thing which we need to do is to force this upon the ministry. We have been trying this for the last 5 years, not very successfully. We are hoping that now that we have a wider, community involved, that we can take it to the right person or the right ears to get this done. Because if there's a protocol to get this recorded and we have these statistics, then it's going to be much easier to have special requirements identified for our SB families, patients. But for that matter, I think generally to do with any disability, we as a country are very poorly served, in this particular area. And there's a lot to be done, not only for the SB community, but for all other disabilities in the country. And this is something which we can all work with. And I think we are quite fortunate in a sense that within the Rotary movement, we have some very significant district action groups. And if we all come together and start to raise this in one voice, I think we can start to make a difference.
Okay, the questions keep coming. I hope we have time.
No, it's okay. No problems.
Right. So President Glory is asking if it is detectable with ultrasound scan.
I don't think so, not at that early stage. I think there is a procedure which involves taking fluids from the spine to be able to identify the condition at that very early stage. Maybe at a later stage, maybe in the second and third trimester, then possibly you can pick it up with ultrasonic methods, but not before.
Kriban, I think it's detectable by ultrasound and amniotic fluid tests. I think that's
at an early stage as well.
Yeah, during pregnancy, yes.
Ah, okay. Well, I stand to be corrected. Thank you, Dr. So you're saying that even at within the first month, you can. I thought it was more taking the amniotic fluids.
I'm not sure exactly at which point you can take it, but yes, I think in certain, in America, for example, some states is making mandatory to rule out spina bifida in fetuses.
Right.
So yeah, so they're quite serious about that. Yeah.
In the US, is abortion allowed at that stage?
Again, I'm not so sure, but
Yeah.
I remember that you can sue your OBGYN for not doing the test, and if you end up as a patient.
Oh, really? Okay.
How serious it is. So it's a standard test in the US actually.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that.
Okay, we have another question from Alliance member G.N. He's asking, how can the Lions Club of KL Central help in creating awareness? Where can we get the necessary information and resources such as brochures, flyers, and etc.?
Okay, thank you for that question. In fact, last year we engaged with one of the Lion clubs. This is with CBM. I can't remember which club, I'm afraid, but we had it's quite an interesting story because we do what we call home visits to the families. So when somebody has an SB child, we sometimes go and visit the homes just to understand the condition of the family, you know, the child itself, himself or herself. Often because they've asked for some assistance, because, you know, obviously we need to be sure that the families are in need and so on and so forth. So in one of these cases, we went to a family to visit myself, Dr. Young and Dr. Amara. In fact, 3 of us went to visit the family. And the mother had requested a wheelchair for the son. So we went to see the family and, you know, spent a good hour there and, you know, just got to know the mother, very nice lady. And then got to know the child. He was only at about that time, maybe about 7 or 8. And he was like ambulating around the house. He had already had a club foot. You know, he was having some difficulty moving around and obviously needed a wheelchair. There's no doubt about it. Then, you know, Dr. Amara asked the mother about his bladder control, and she was complaining he doesn't want to go to the loo, and, you know, it was very difficult. And you know, just out of interest, I just went to the house to look at the toilet, and it was in a deplorable state. Right? Then I was thinking to myself, so the kid was not going to the bathroom, not because he didn't want to, but because there was no proper toilet facilities, really. So what we did was, okay, we had the request for wheelchair. So we connected with, fortunately, I think one of our members knew the Lions Club in Cheras, I think it was. And we connected with them, raised some funds, and we redid the toilet. And, you know, that solved a huge problem for the family because the kid went to the toilet and it was much easier. Mother had much easier time to deal with it. So again, you know, the home visit becomes very important because you start to identify these kind of things. So yes, so it's a long answer, sorry, but we've done work with the Lions Club. And, you know, I think there's many avenues to work together. Leaflets, brochures, etc. We have. If you can connect with me, I can put you in touch with that. There's also in my presentation at the end, there is a website, which is the CBM website. If you go there, there's quite a lot of information. And, you know, but feel free to take my details afterwards and you can contact with me. I can easily send you the brochures and the information. And also, if you have particular clubs in mind who might be willing to assist, we can connect quite easily with you know, with CBM and move forward on that basis.
I hope that answers your question, President G.N. Okay, moving next question from PP Shirley. Fetal surgery, as dangerous as it may sound, seems to be a safer option for the mom and baby. How far advanced are we in Malaysia regarding this type of surgery?
I think as far as I know, it's quite rare. And because of obviously the costs and the complications and so on. I really don't know enough about this actually to say where, you know, hand on heart that you know, this is whether we have any centers of excellence. I think Dr. Chahul, maybe you could answer this. I think in Singapore there is a center of excellence doing this kind of surgery. Maybe you can come in on this.
Sorry, I don't know very much as far as the kind of equipment and facilities available as well. Not my area of expertise, sorry.
Right, right. I know, yeah, I think we should tell everybody you're a dental surgeon, yes. You know, when I was in India 2 years ago for the SB&H conference in New Delhi, we met up with many doctors from India, and one of them, Dr. Santosh, was spearheading not so much fetal surgery, but surgery to do with enhancement of the bladder. Okay, what this is quite an interesting approach. Part of the problem with the SP children, as I said, is the bladder control, and so they have to go. Most of the kids have to go to the bathroom every hour if they want to be able to function properly, because they have to empty the bladders very, very regularly. So for a young adult, I mean, we have many young adults in KL and Malaysia as well, SP. If you're between the ages of, say, 12 and 18, I mean, your whole social mobility is affected. Because if you have to remember, imagine if you have to go to the loo every half an hour, 45 minutes or hour, how can you function in social circles? So what they have done in India is, and Dr. Shahul runs a center which does this very regularly, is to extend the bladder. So they use some other, organs in the body, and they extend the bladder. And so instead of a 1 hour retention or a 45-minute retention, they extend it to about a 2 to 3 hour retention. And I've met some of the children or the kids who have been through this operation, and it's like life transforming for them. Of course, there are issues to do with the operation. There can be rejection, there can be other things, but they seem to be doing it quite successfully in India. And I'm hoping at some stage that I will be able to invite Dr. Santosh to come, maybe through a Zoom connection to talk about this separately. And maybe at that time, I will invite, Rotary Club of Subang to get involved. But going back to the fetal surgery, as far as I know, very, very, I think that's very rarely done here. But again, I will take this down as a question which I will ask our panel of doctors as well. Maybe I'll be able to have a better answer to this in future.
Right, and last question from me. Okay. For those families who are in the B40 category and they have no access to, affording these physiotherapies and stuff, what do they do?
Well, this is where an organization like SB&H becomes quite important. But we are not in touch with many, many families, so many of them don't know about us. So extending that connection is quite important. So with the families we are in connection with, when they come into difficulties, they do write to us, they connect with us through, there is a page in our website, but also many of the families would be able to ring. There is a number which we have, a SB&H number. So when they connect with us, then we do this. We go and do a home visit. We find out about the family's background and so on. Once we confirm that they are in need, then we either raise the funds separately, or we have funds within the organization to be able to assist. And we've been able to assist quite a few families like that. We've been quite fortunate that over the last, particularly the last 5 years, through the RCD SB&H connection, I've personally been involved in major fundraising efforts over those years. And for example, in 2017, we had a major concert we organized. We raised about well over $250,000. And that money was actually sent to SB&H, because that's where the money went to. And that money has helped a huge amount of families, actually. And also to raise the profile of SP in the country, the condition. So that kind of fundraising has to continue as long as the money is available. Then of course we can assist families. But the first point is that the families need to know that there's support available. And of course that's not easy, because a lot of the B40 families are not connected through the social media platforms and so on and so forth. So it has to come through personal connections and so on and so forth. That's where, again, I think we have this amazing opportunity with this 90 clubs we have in District 3300 and an equivalent number of clubs in District 3100 to be able to make a huge difference to this, connection with the SP community. There are thousands of people we really don't know, we don't have connection with, and if they knew we had had this resource and the facility, I'm sure we'll have a lot more requests. And then, of course, the the need for fundraising and the need to expand our reach in terms of the SB community becomes even more important. So yeah, so I think that's the best way to do it, is to connect the families to the national organization, and through that, and also through the Rotary Club, through Dash, and then maybe hopefully we can make a difference to a lot more families.
All right, that's the end of the questions that we have. Thank you so much for answering all the questions that these people have for you. And thank you so much, everyone, for asking the questions. We are all now a little bit smarter regarding this topic. Thank you very much for your time. Back to you, MC.
Dina, can I just, sorry.
Yes.
Can I just ask you if you can keep a record of the questions? That will be very useful for us as well.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
All right. Meeting host, can you please save the questions?
Yeah,
All right,
we are recording the session, so the chat will be saved.
Thank you. Excellent.
And you can have the recording too, Kriban.
Right. Thanks a lot, Raj.
All right, thank you very much, Rotarian Dina. Next, I would like to invite President Dinesh to thank our guest speaker.
Thank you, Regina Haslina, Dr. Kriban. One last question before I proceed to thank you. You said there is a video. Where's the video?
My apologies. Yeah, we were supposed to show it at the end.
Ouch.
Very good point. Thank you for the reminder. Do we have time? Do we have time?
Maybe
Yes,
after you close the meeting,
yeah.
Okay,
Maybe
once you close it, then we'll show it at the end.
Okay. Yeah. But anyhow, this is very informative and something I would bet very new for most of us. Some of the term that you used is totally new. We never heard of, but it is very informative and it's an eye opener for us. We do not know there are 4,450 childs are given birth with this defect. That is something really worrying, and everything that you have mentioned is sums up to something that can be related to food or malnutrition, or something that can be can be avoided if we have a good practice of food intake. Yeah, and you have very attractive plan and activities and projects that you have ahead. I hope all the best on all the activities. And yes, I think you have to battle this from all corners, including giving aid and creating awareness for the early prevention, and also creating alarm to the authorities if this is something can be eliminated through policies and actions from these policymakers. Okay, because along the talk you have mentioned that some of the countries that they really look into this very seriously, but I think we and our government also should take action on this. With that all being said, thank you very much once again, Dr. Kriban. It's a very informative talk. Thank you for giving the talk in RC Subang's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, President Dinesh. So now we have reached to the end of our meeting, and it has been a pleasure for me to be a virtual MC for the meeting, and I would like to pass the floor back to President Dinesh to thank our guests and to close the meeting. And we shall proceed with virtual fellowship then after.
All right, before I close the meeting, this is another announcement. To all in this meeting, I would like to extend our invitation. So we're going to have our Christmas fellowship, as I mentioned earlier, on 27 December. So feel free to join us. We are strictly following all the SOPs. And one of the SOPs is to bring the secret gift worth not less than 30 ringgit. Okay, you may come without a mask. We can give you a mask, but don't come without a Christmas gift. All right. With that, yes, I would like to close the meeting. Thank you very much. The fellowship continues right after the video.
Show the video.
The video.
Yeah, Raj, are you going to show the video? Okay. This is just a short video indicating what the condition is.
The first stages of the developmental defect of spina bifida occur in the first 2 to 3 weeks after conception, before the mother knows she is pregnant. The defect can occur anywhere along the length of the spine, but most commonly occurs in the lower back. The severity of the defect varies greatly from one individual to another, ranging from no noticeable impact to severe paralysis and loss of sensation. Lesions higher in the spinal column result in more weakness of the trunk and possibly the arms, as well as the legs. Because the nerves that control the bowel and bladder are located on the lowest part of the spine, the function of those organs will likely be compromised in all clinically significant cases. Myelomeningocele, the most common type of spina bifida, presents as a sac of exposed meninges or spinal cord membranous coverings, frequently containing parts of the spinal cord and the nerves attached to it. When a baby is born with this condition, it is critical to surgically repair the defect and cover the lesion with skin within the first 24 to 72 hours after birth to prevent infection in the nervous system and further nerve damage. 80% of children born with myelomeningocele will also have hydrocephalus. Hydrocephalus occurs when the cerebrospinal fluid flow is obstructed or blocked, and then pressure from that fluid may build in the ventricular system, causing the brain and skull to expand. It is typically treated by surgical insertion of a shunt to allow the fluid to flow out from the brain. It is important to note that each child born with spina bifida is unique and will have different degrees of clinical symptoms and functional limitations. With the appropriate medical care, rehabilitation, guidance, and encouragement, many individuals with spina bifida may live productive and fulfilling lives.
Thank you, everyone.